We have got to stop asking the question, can AI work for us? Does it work? Because that question needs to be retired. The reality is, we know the answer is yes, it can. And the data is continuing to prove it. And we're going to talk about why 33% of the market right now is saying they're already seeing costs go down and revenue go up as a direct result of AI. However, that's not the full story, because there's more to the story, which is in the 55% that are stalled out and the other 13% that are bleeding as a direct result of AI, where their costs are going up, their revenue's not going up, or it's going down and nothing's coming back in return. And so today, I want to talk more about where this is coming from and why this is happening. I'm Christopher Lind, and this is Future Focused. And this week, I'm going to be dissecting some new data coming out of the C-suite and talking about what it means for leaders across the board who are responsible for setting the strategy and actually doing the work. But before we get into it, if you appreciate my content, if you find value in it, if you enjoy it, would you do me a favor and like this, subscribe? I know many of you don't subscribe, even though you listen to it. And if you know somebody who would benefit, feel free to share it with them. Say, hey, you should check this out. It means the world to me. And if you so feel inclined, you can even go to buymeacoffee.com/Christopher Lind, and you can say thank you by buying me a virtual coffee. But it helps me continue to keep this growing and hopefully help people succeed in this wild world we're living in. Okay, so let's get into it, because this week I'm going to be talking specifically and unpacking PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, recently did their 29th Global CEO Survey. So that just came out for 2026. You can look it up if you'd like. It's a 25-page survey, goes into some details. So this week is not based on, Christopher's opinion or the work that I'm doing, although it will be informed through those lenses. This is the sentiment of, I think it's over like 4,000 CEOs from around the globe. So data is starting to pour back in, and there's some really good stuff coming from this. And it's a positive indication we're moving forward in the adoption curve as it relates to AI. Now, specifically, I'm going to be focusing on two charts, and I want to break down those charts real quick, and then I'm going to talk through how this week's show is going to be structured. So the first one is this chart, which is basically, for those of you who aren't watching the video version, it's a 9-box showing, cost and revenue and where organizations sit. And so this is where I'm saying about 33% of global CEOs are saying they are seeing a positive return from their AI investments. Now, technically only 12% are seeing both a cost decrease and revenue increase, but 33% overall, they're either seeing one or both of those. And we'll kind of unpack the reality of this chart, but then go into it further. Now, the other part though is you've got about 40 or 54%, 53% of folks who they're just stalled, and that's like right down that middle layer where maybe they're seeing one, but not the others going the other direction, or maybe they're just literally sitting flat. And then you've got the 13% that are bleeding. They're actually losing as a result of AI. And so I'm going to talk about this and what it means and how you should respond and interpret this. The other one that we're going to talk about is this one, which is specifically one of the questions that they asked, which is, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements related to AI use at your company? And if you look at the first two, they're extremely high. So it only shows the agree and strongly agree. But if you look at the culture of the organization is enabling AI, and the technology environments are enabling, AI, those are really, really strong. So the vibes are good. Over 50% agree with that. And then another, 12 to almost 20% strongly agree. So you're seeing 2/3, in some cases, 3/4 of organizations saying, hey, we're feeling good about where our culture's at and where our technology's at. And yet, and I think this is an interesting part, underneath that, when you start digging into the specifics of, we have a roadmap for our AI work. We have formalized processes and risk mitigation in place. We have the right talent in place. We have the right investments, and we have our AI tapped into our data. These are some big things that are dropping off, specifically the data one. So a lot of people are feeling good about the AI, and yet the AI that they're feeling good about is actually not tied into their data. So there's a bit of a disconnect going on here that I want to talk about and unpack and help break down, what to do with that. So those are the two charts you're going to hear me reference, and I'll pull up on screen for those of you watching here and there. Before we get into it, though, let me then explain how this week's episode is going to break down. I'm breaking it into two parts. The first part is going to be specifically an address to CEOs and C-suite leaders who are in that decision-making chair right now, who may be seeing this data and responding, or even if you haven't seen this data, you're essentially making some big decisions about what you're doing with AI. And I want to talk directly to you about how to interpret this data, and then alongside that, some other things that I want you to take into consideration as you move forward to ensure you don't end up in the dead zone. Then after that, I'm going to spend 10 to 15 minutes talking to the direct reports of those C-suite leaders, the folks who are responsible for actually executing some of this stuff and maybe in the thick of things right now, trying to figure out how to make sense of it. And maybe some of you may be looking at this going, are you serious right now looking at this data? I want to address this and talk about how to respond well to that. So with that, I would, and then at the end, I will actually kind of bridge the two and kind of talk about how we bridge those two gaps and all work together on this. I would encourage you to listen to the whole thing. The whole thing is only going to be about 35 minutes or so. But if you say, hey, I'm just here for the part that's most relevant to me, you can look in the show notes and you'll see when those transitions happen, and then you can jump to your part. But like I said, I'd encourage you to come back when it makes sense. So anyway, all right, there we go. You've got the context of where this is coming from. I broke that down. You understand the flow of the show, and you know what we're going to be hitting on today. So let's get into it. And with that, let me transition specifically to my CEO and C-suite leaders, because this data in some regards is a bit of a mirror test. And so I want you to, I'm going to basically go through four things that kind of like layer on top of each other that I really want to speak directly to for you based on what came out of this data. So the first thing is this. I think that this chart here is good. There are good things about it. And I hope you're one of the C-suite leaders that is feeling good about the culture and technology that you have. I think it is a very good thing that, we're reaching a point where many organizations are feeling, you're starting to see it. And I hope that's what you're experiencing. You're starting to see your employees, your teams, they're starting to embrace AI. They might be moving past some of this paranoia that, AI coming in is only here to do their jobs or to eliminate their jobs. Hopefully you've started to integrate some of these core systems into your tech stack. So I think it's really good that many of you are, and you need to continue fostering that. And I hope as a senior leader, you need to keep that up and you need to continue that path and helping set expectations, because there still is a lot of fear. There still are a lot of people who are very worried about where this is going. And I talk to people in your organizations all the time who still are very uncertain. And even though it might be starting to feel like it's looking better, or they're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, they're still nervous. And so I would encourage you to continue reinforcing some of these good vibes and saying them, making sure you're highlighting them. At the same time, we have to acknowledge, what's going on here with the fact that most of you all are still not in this green zone. Okay, so we've got that disconnect, and you have to be willing to look in the mirror and say, okay, we're feeling good, and yet, it's not all green. And so you have to be able to recognize that, and you need to do a diagnostic on yourself and say, where are we actually? Because if you are someone who is feeling good about AI and yet you're bleeding, now is the time, okay, for you to start leaning in and doing more. Now, to be clear, this is kind of transitioning to the third point. I am not saying, but before I get to that, you have to recognize, is this more than a feeling, as Boston would say? Okay. Is it more than a feeling? Because if it's not, then you need to step forward. Now, if it is, great. But in either case, I would still encourage, and this is the next beat on this, what this chart represents to me is there's still a little bit of cognitive dissonance here, in the sense that you're feeling good about it, yet you're acknowledging, and maybe you don't realize, the fact that some of these things that you're saying are not in place. You don't feel strongly that your AI tools are, or even agree with the fact they're tied to your own documents and data. I am telling you right now, that is a major miss. And as good as you feel about it, or as much as that chart may show you're winning with AI, you are leaving a lot on the table. And so if you're feeling good, even if you're winning, if you don't start moving up those bottom 5, if that doesn't start significantly increasing and you don't start leaning in on those, you're never going to move into the green that you would see on this chart. You're never going to move out of the red zone into the green zone. But on top of that, I would actually challenge that if this data is true about your organization and you're feeling good, and maybe you even see the green zone stuff, but you're down here where you're like, yeah, but we aren't doing these things, or I have no indication that we're doing these things, I would challenge that the green you may be experiencing is not real green. It's not a sustainable green. It's not something that you're going to be able to see long term. Now, to be clear on this, I am not advocating that you shift gears out of your C-suite responsibilities of staying focused on strategy and, get into the weeds. All right. I'm not asking or suggesting that what you should do is that you should dive into the details on this and start to get into the weeds of, I want to start dictating how we're attracting high quality technical talent. I want to get into the APIs work that we're doing to see, how are we accessing our documents and data. I am not suggesting that you should pull out of your responsibilities as the senior most leader in the organization and get into those weeds. In fact, you will crush your teams and you will further validate the fears that your teams are experiencing, that AI is going to make their job worse if you do. Okay. What I am encouraging you to do is start to hold your teams accountable for answering some of these questions. You need to be asking your teams right now about this, asking them, hey, what are we doing to formalize our responsible AI and risk processes? Is that a project that's on your radar? Maybe it's happening and you just don't know about it because you haven't thought to ask. Maybe your data and tools are more integrated into your system than you realize, but maybe you don't know to check on that and to ask about. Maybe you haven't talked to your HR leaders about, hey, what are we doing to make sure we're attracting and retaining high quality talent related to AI? How are we vetting to make sure that people are capable and qualified to use AI? And I'm not just talking about your AI builders. I'm talking about the entire expansion of your workforce. Like, have you asked your organization, hey, do we have a pulse on how effective everybody in our organization is with AI? If you're not asking that question, I get the sense from this, either it's not happening or it's just not on your radar. And that's something you do need to dig into, or whatever you think you're going to get on this chart is not going to be there. Now, the last thing I will say to you on this is, as a C-suite leader, I'm going to caution you to be very, very, very careful how much emphasis you place on cost and revenue as your only two drivers. This was one of my biggest concerns with this research report, is the fact that a lot of what it's looking at is, are we driving down costs and are we increasing revenue? And I understand at the highest level of the organization, those are the kinds of things that you're being held accountable for and that you're feeling pressure to do. What I'm going to encourage you to do, though, is to not get too looped up on those for two reasons. First of all, one, they're lag measures. So if you're in the red zone here, it's you're in the red, but it's not telling you any reasons why. And I think this chart is actually giving you more indications of why. But if you're only looking at cost and revenue, you're not going to catch what's going wrong until it's already happened and there's not a whole lot you can do. And so that's why I'm saying now is the time to lean in and be asking questions and holding your teams accountable for some of those other more detailed things so that you can be seeing, are we on track to move to green? Don't wait until you get the answer and you go, we're not. Are you doing the work to follow? Are you on track with it? And are you digging into those things so you know what lead indicators you should be looking at, so you're not only looking at the lag measures and chasing after that stuff. The second reason for it, and this is my final piece to you, is AI is extremely deceptive, okay? And one of the things that I continue to see in a lot of the work that I'm doing is people are making a lot of short-term trade-offs at long-term costs. And just one example, if you didn't listen to last week's episode of Future Focus, go check it out. But one very notable example of this is what happened with Grok and its Nudify app, or its Nudify capability in Flux, its image generation capability. Now, that may be an extreme example, but my point with it was the pressure to boost revenue and increase subscriptions and, increase credibility led to some catastrophic decisions that is going to cost the organization in the long run. And I bring that to your attention because you do need to be careful that now is the time to really make sure you are clear on what your organizational strategy is and you are modeling and communicating what your organizational values are. Because if you don't, and your organization, all they hear from you is drive down costs and increase revenue, there are going to be a lot of short-term decisions being made that might make it look like you're in this green zone. For now, it might push you up there for a very small window of time and then very quickly, faster than you can even imagine, drop you into that very bottom quadrant. And you don't want to be there. And so that's just where I'm going to end with that, is to just be careful that you don't overemphasize the cost and the revenue. And I understand why that's the natural tendency, but it's important that you don't, because especially with AI type initiatives, it will cost you greatly in the end. Okay. That concludes my CEO C-suite leaders. Now I want to transition over to the direct reports and the teams who are responsible for this. So for those of you who are tuning in, who have seen this report, this is a viewfinder into where your CEOs are right now. They're all just seeing this report out of PwC going, hey, 33% of companies are winning right now. You need to recognize right now and empathize with the pressure your leaders, your senior most leaders, are feeling right now. And this data is only going to compound that. Every C-suite leader in the world, essentially now, in 2026 and beyond, is going to start feeling the heat of, hey, when's the boards are going to start asking, when are we going to get this magic? All 33% of organizations are seeing a lift. Why are we not? And that pressure, as you well know, is going to start rolling downhill. And it's important that you're aware of that so that you can start to be preparing for that. Because if right now you're still kicking the can down the road, if you're still asking, going to my opening line on this, we're not really sure if AI is going to work for us. We're waiting to see what happens. This report right here is just one of many that's going to be coming this year that is going to put you in a very vulnerable position if you're still in the waiting and see mode. And so I would encourage you to shift out of that gear real quick, because your bosses and your boss's bosses or whoever are now facing that heat. And I think this expands on why you're in the danger zone if you sit there, because not only is this chart emphasizing that, hey, 33% are winning, none of those leaders want to find themselves in the dead zone. They don't. And not only are they going to be getting pressure, but they're going to be going, I mean, my peers are doing it. Why are we not doing it? And if you take that in conjunction with how the senior most leaders are feeling, how they're vibing right now, okay? They're vibing that the culture and the tech that they've provided you should be what you need to get there. Okay. They gave you, they fostered the culture. They've brought in the tech. If you don't deliver, this report is confirming for them that, hey, this is no longer a me problem. This is a they problem. And so they're going to be starting to push that heat down. And to be fair, I want to speak to you because use this report to help illustrate some of these things so that you can know where to focus your attention, because clearly they recognize that some of these things aren't happening, yet they're feeling good. And so you can use that to your advantage because, yeah, maybe they're feeling good, but you can help illustrate that, yes, it is true, but you're also acknowledging that we don't have the investments and the talents in the house that we need to be successful. That's a problem. That's a problem. And so you're going to need to recognize, hey, they're facing enormous pressure. So if I'm going to push back, my pushback cannot simply be, well, we're waiting and seeing, because the external pressure from the market is only going to rise. It is only going to rise. And with 33% of companies now reporting that they are seeing success with AI, that means a third. Okay. Nobody wants to be in that 2/3 bucket. They don't. And now there's conclusive data from organizations from around the world saying we are winning. We are winning right now in two of the biggest categories that matter. Now, I will tell you right now in the previous section, if you didn't listen to it, I won't recap the whole thing, but I did call attention to the fact that there's more going on than cost and revenue, as they well know, because they're recognizing there's gaps in there, which ties to my last point in terms of your defense strategy right now. You have to get off the pot. Your clock is ticking and you are running out of time if you are not taking seriously the plan of attack. Now, to be clear, I am not saying as a defense strategy, you have to have all the answers. You have to have everything baked out. You have to know exactly how it's all going to play out. You have to be able to know every single, detail of what's ahead. But the days of vague excuses are not going to fly. And in my previous section to the CEOs, my advice was not to get in the weeds of what you're doing, but to start asking questions about, hey, where is the roadmap for our AI initiatives? What are we specifically doing? What are we doing about our processes? What are we doing about our talent? And in the past, these questions may not have been coming, but they're going to, and that is very much the message that I'm sending to the senior most leaders, is not to get into the weeds, but to start putting pressure on that and to start asking the right questions and digging into it and holding people accountable to having answers to those things. And so that's you. And you are the most equipped to be able to answer these questions well. If you don't have the AI talent, why not? And what are you doing about it? If you aren't integrated, if you're an IT leader and you aren't integrating your AI systems into it, why not? And what are you doing about it? And if there's a specific reason why you're not, how can you articulate that? Because the pressure is going to continue to turn up. And as C-suite leaders continue to face the pressure that they're facing, it's going to start landing on you. And the days of we're working on it, they're not going to last. In fact, I would say they're gone. Okay, so let me conclude with kind of like the synthesis. So I want to bring everybody back together here and talk about this because, I think one of the biggest things we need to recognize, whether you're a C-suite leader or you're, one of the folks carrying some of this stuff out, is there is a conflict right now that I am seeing, and this data shines a very bright light on it. And that is, there is enormous pressure to be one of these 33%ers, to be one of these top quadrants of people who are seeing things. And it's being looked at through a very narrow lens, through a cost revenue lens. And yet there's this massive gap in terms of understanding and actually executing against how we get there. How do we actually move from the red quadrant to the green quadrant? And so this is both parties need to recognize, hey, this is a gap. Now, why that gap is there, that's a discussion that requires people coming together. And my guess is, based on the work I do, it's a combination of many things that you need to have some difficult and honest conversations about. Now, the common ground that I think you can both merge around is the operational rigor of how you actually execute this. One of the biggest gaps that I continue to see in organizations as it relates to AI strategies, there's two of them that I want to address. The first is that AI strategy is its own thing, that pursuing AI and AI technology and AI advancement is its own specific venture. And in very rare instances is that actually the case. In almost every case that I work in, AI should be an enabler, an accelerator, an amplifier to the things you're already doing. So if you have gaps, I just had a conversation this week about it, AI is going to exacerbate all of it. So if you've got gaps in your strategy, well, it's gonna exacerbate it. If you got gaps in your talent pool, it's gonna exacerbate it. All these other things. And so if you're just pursuing AI for the sake of AI, you're going to miss that. And so both y'all need to see that and say, all right, let's not get distracted with the AI sprinkles. Let's actually focus on what is our operational rigor? Where are our gaps today? Why are they there? And what are we going to do about it? And I recognize that the solution to that in some ways is the boring, unsexy work that we often want to skip, especially if those of you listening are, in the more senior leadership positions. We often say, well, that's not really my thing. I like working in strategy. Well, good for you. But your strategy means absolutely nothing if you can't actually execute against it. And now in both of our conversations, we talked about the fact that it's not about micromanaging. It's not about you needing to become the expert in these things, but you do need to start asking those deeper questions. You need to start pushing greater accountability to the unsexy operational rigor. And, to you senior leaders, the senior most folks, you have to recognize you're not going to get to the green overnight. Okay. You're not going to get here overnight. You have to get some of this operational rigor. To those of you who are actually doing the execution, that there's more work to be done than that can be waved a magic wand over. But at the same time, I work with way too many organizations who are kicking it down the road going, well, we're just waiting on the AI part. We're just doing our usual thing. Those days are gone. And I think it's about coming together and recognizing, what is that balancing act look like for your organization? Because in the work I do, it looks different for every single organization. And given that, okay, my kind of point here is, if you need help with this, all right, I don't like doing sales pitchy type things. And so this will be relatively brief, but this is where I live in both of your camps. I work with CEOs to help define lead measures, to help ask the right questions, to help keep you out of the weeds while still making sure that those details are happening. And with you teams, I spend time working with the teams going, here's what your senior leaders are actually stressing about. Here are the pressures that they're facing. Here's why they feel good, but yet they're still getting beat up in the boardroom over some of these things. So let's help build a plan to help them articulate the why. Because what I can tell you right now is, to both of you, nobody has all the answers to this. Even those who are in that top 12% quadrant, I promise you, I've worked with some of those organizations. They still don't have the answers. They've made some really smart bets. They're seeing some good things play out, but they still largely are figuring things out, and they're still getting their teeth knocked out every once in a while. So nobody's running the playbook and has mastered this. And so it's not about saying we have to have an ironclad plan that gives us a bulletproof strategy and a bulletproof execution plan. It's about having a clean strategy and execution plan that you feel good about, that you're going to be continuing to iterate and adapt off of. Okay. So let's close this out. For the CEO right now, I would encourage you to check your P&L. If your costs are up and your revenue's flat, if you are in that stall zone right now, pause what you're doing. Even if you're in the green, I would say pause what you're doing, because given where things are at with these other points, there's some disconnects here that are worth investigating. And as I've said before, AI is only going to amplify things. So even things that may look good right now can have some very serious unintended consequences. So do that today. That can be an action that you take. For the teams out there, make sure you're actually pressure testing your AI, that you're thinking through some of these things, the implications of the decisions that you're making. Is your AI working based on your actual data, or is it just working based on generic general data? And is it actually making a measurable impact on the things you're doing, or does it just look good on a bar chart that shows a heat map that at least looks good on the surface, but really it's just a veil or a mask for the chaos underneath it? And but if nothing else, I think that this chart should be an encouragement. This one right here should be an encouragement, because to those who are still skeptical, those who are wondering, can this work? Is it really possible for AI to improve our business, to make things better from where we are today? The answer is yes. The key is to focus in on the problems that you're trying to solve, building your roadmap, and then making your way to join that winning circle in a sustainable way that doesn't just get you into the green for a moment, but actually keeps you there for the long term. Okay. So again, I would encourage you to go check this out. If I can be of any help to you, you know where to find me. I would encourage you to send me a message. And by all means, I hope you have a great week, and we will see you on the other side.